Thank you all for being here for today's Environmental Ethics Seminar. As I always say, this is a part of the Environmental Ethics Certificate Program, and the seminar series has been held every semester since 1983 when the certificate was established. So a long-running program, and as I always say, you know, the issues that were present in 1983 when this program was first started are maybe different than some of the issues we're facing today, but certainly from an environmental ethics perspective, the topic and the program is just as relevant as it was when it was founded. This is our last seminar of the semester. We typically have 5-ish each semester. These sessions are required for students who are enrolled in the seminar class, but they're also open to the public, so we've got now 40 people attending virtually, so many more that are visitors here, which is great. And tonight we're going to hear about the Georgia coast, specifically Tybee Island, but certainly the issues we'll hear about today are not necessarily unique to Tybee, although some of them probably are, but these are issues that coastal communities are facing throughout the United States and throughout the world. The seminar title, as you can see, is Local and Regional Policy Efforts for Equitable Sea Level Rise Adaptation. That's very specific. I think we'll hear about that and probably some other related issues. But without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, who are all in important leadership roles in the Tybee Island local government. On your right is Mayor Shirley Sessions. She's the mayor of Tybee Island. I'll change this. Let's see there. As I saw on the website, you are Tybee's first female mayor since the city was incorporated in 1887. Shirley is a native of Atlanta, but she's called Tybee home since 1994, and got involved in local government just about that time. And before being elected as mayor, served 4 terms on the Tybee Island City Council. Shawn Gillen, sitting next to Mayor Sessions, is the city manager for Tybee Island. I think you'll hear more about what that actually means throughout the talk tonight. But his public administration experience also includes a lot of time up in the Midwest, in Kentucky, Illinois, what else? Minnesota, before relocating to Georgia and more recently to Tybee Island. He's also an adjunct professor of public finance at Eastern Kentucky University and has a PhD in public administration. And Alan Robertson, standing next to me, is project manager with AWR Strategic Consulting. And after a career in finance, relocated to Tybee Island, I think supposedly to retire. Supposedly. But he has, as you'll see and hear about tonight, has dedicated his energy and passion to really improve the resilience of Tybee Island, and we'll hear about his role as we go on tonight. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Alan to kick things off here.
Alfie, thank you very much, and good evening everyone here in the audience, and to those of you joining us on Zoom. As Alfie said, we want to talk to you a little bit about the issues that Tybee Island faces as a representative coastal community on the coast of Georgia. I am the project manager hired by the city to help plan the coastal resilience initiatives and then to execute them. I'm just going to set the stage for the 2 principals to talk. I've learned a lot in this role and in working with the mayor and the city manager. I know a lot of the details and can explain what we do and how we do it, but the complexity of managing the inherent tensions in any coastal city between economic growth and environment, between residents and visitors, between everything looks good now and we have increasing sunny day flooding. All of that is what the 2 of these will be, these 2 folks will be talking about. We would encourage your questions sort of at the end after we say our piece, because we do really want to engage with all of you, particularly in your positions as students of this art. Hope we can share something for you. So Tybee Island, here's a drone shot of Tybee Island, completely surrounded by water. I see this shot sometimes and think, what in the world were we thinking when we decided to establish something here? Yes, a coastal barrier island of Georgia, all the same attributes of any of the coastal barrier islands, quite frankly, from North Carolina to Florida, because the continental shelf looks about the same there. But we have unique issues. Next slide, please. We are a town of 3,000 permanent residents. That is an increasingly popular summer resort, the beach at Tybee Island. You all have probably come down to Tybee Island for the summer. 3,000 residents will go to 50 or 60,000 visitors on a big weekend in Tybee. We have about 3,000 public parking spaces on the island, and we can see 14,000 cars hit us. So while that is the economic engine of Tybee, and quite frankly of Chatham County, of which we are a part, you can just appreciate the impact that many people have for that period of time on the infrastructure. We also are bordered on the north by the Savannah River Channel. You may know the Port of Savannah is third or fourth largest in the country. The channel itself was just recently widened and deepened. We are seeing bigger ships more often. That kind of traffic, while again, great economic engine to Savannah, of which we benefit, causes significant damage to the environment. On the back of the island, as we call the back, the west side, we have a tidal salt marsh. Now, Georgia coast has the most extensive marsh in the country. Ours happens to be tidal and salt. Our average tide is 7.5 feet, significant tide, from mud to you can't see the grass. Okay? We had an incident a couple of weeks ago with an astronomical high tide. It was at 10.5 feet. Habitat to a lot of wildlife, obviously the fish and some other things. And we happen to be sea turtle nesting habitat, federally protected. We also have federally protected shorebirds. Over 300,000 shorebirds stop at Tybee every year on their way from the south up to Nova Scotia. So every presenting issue you can have for environmental change, climate change, economic growth is here on Tybee. Oh yeah, and since 2016 we've had a few hurricanes. In fact, we've had several 1 in 100-year back-to-back hurricanes, as you all know. That just exacerbates the issue. Our planning for this started in 2016, in April actually, when University of Georgia was a lead author of the Tybee Island Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. I believe the first, or one of the first in the state. It was a plan that, as most plans do, assessed our critical infrastructure, assessed our weaknesses, and offered a series of recommendations for what the city could do. Now, 5 years ago, this is Hurricane Matthew. This is the causeway on the way to Tybee. And then on the other side, you see representative flooding. 5 years ago, we had significant flooding issues. That happened in October of 16. So here comes the sea level rise plan that says you're going to have problems. We actually did a master plan later that year, the city did, which also said you're going to have problems. And then, fortunate for us, Matthew hit us. Fortunate because that was the catalyst to take some action. That was 5 years ago. This was last week. This was the high astronomical tide on some of the streets that border the marsh. As much work as we've done, which you'll see here in a moment, we continue to suffer from nuisance flooding, sunny day flooding, and increasingly high tides. Here's a map of the island. This map was the original map we used to define our critical weak spots. The green around the edges are the dune field, and in some cases, we have an extensive dune field, 15 feet high at the seaward side and probably 500 feet wide. But down here on the south end, which is our commercial district, a lot of people live. Right here in the very middle of the island, which is the nodal point of the island, and up here, we had at-grade access points. You literally could walk or drive straight onto the beach. We decided to build some dunes. This is now 2018 into 2019. This is the commercial district that you see. We artificially constructed dunes the entire length of that. On the left, you'll see the pier at 16th Street on Tybee, all the way south, protecting the commercial district. Yeah. We built those dunes, and you can see them here again, in anticipation of a beach nourishment. The Corps of Army Engineers has been nourishing Tybee's beaches for 50 years. They do it every 7 to 10 years based on need. And you can see in this picture, which is early 2019, while we now have dune field and not yet vegetated, mind you, there's no beach at high tide. That's high tide. I measured that at about 5 feet from toe of the dune. The Corps came in, did what they do so well, and nourished the beach, and we got some extra sand put out there at the small end. This picture was taken at the end of the nourishment in February of 2020. So now you see the dune field, and you see an extensive beach, which after 18 months is deteriorated somewhat. We took the opportunity during the beach nourishment to build dunes where dunes will not grow naturally, and that is the nodal point of the island. The longshore current just keeps that sand moving south. It will never attract there. Our thought was, let's build a berm, in effect, and see if by establishing a base, we can get some accretion naturally. We also are hopeful that we have improved the sea turtle nesting habitat by giving them more ability. They always nest at the toe of the dune. At this point today, you can see this dune we built, probably 2,000, 2,500 linear feet long and vegetated, mostly with sea oats. That's as good as we could do artificially, and we just hope Mother Nature works with us to improve it. So now we look green all the way around on the ocean side of the island. But in fact, during Matthew and Irma and Michael and Florence and Dorian, most of our flooding came from the back end of the island, the tidal salt marsh. Okay, we call this the back river. And the issue for us is twofold. One is that's the way the hurricanes have been hitting us. Okay, they come up from the south, and they have not come at us directionally. They come up from the south, so they hit Florida, they hit Jacksonville, they hit Tybee, they hit Charleston, and move up. Number two, that water in the marsh is not a sea surge, right? When the seas rise, they surge. You know which direction they're going, and you know where it's coming from. And so you put up seawalls, and you put up dunes, okay, and you expand your beach to accommodate that. On the back end of the island, that's just rising water. I mean, this water just rises up, and if you know your physics, that's extremely hard to manage, because that rising water will lift most of the obstructions you put into place. We defined, by the red outline, a scope of work and applied for a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant to study this, quite frankly, make an assessment of it, make some recommendations to City Council. We are working with the University of Georgia, of course, on this project. Have been working for a couple of years now, got held up by the pandemic, but we're coming to an end. Popular opinion today is there's nothing you can do back there. It's all privately owned. They all have fishing piers and bulwarks and bulkheads. Nothing you can do, don't waste your money, to build another seawall. It worked on the ocean side. Let's just take that property and build a seawall. We know neither one of those is right. Okay? They just define the endpoints for us. So the point of the assessment is to try to find an array, and it will be an array and mix of things we could do that might mitigate some of the flooding. We are taking very on-the-ground practical steps. We got some FEMA grants. We are lifting homes. That's a classic Tybee cottage at grade that was flooded and is being lifted. That's tremendous value both to the city and to the homeowners. The homeowners need to share in that expense, and some of them can and some of them can't. And some of them choose to lift and some of them don't. And then we, again with the FEMA grant, are developing a stormwater management plan, actually taking an inventory of our stormwater system. And in this case, it's both gray and green, with an engineering firm we work with and with the University of Georgia, to come up with an assessment and a plan. So what I've just taken you through looked like this, okay? And I would tell you in retrospect, everybody's story is linear and everybody's story makes sense, because it's always in hindsight. Oh, we did an assessment plan, we got permitting, we built this dune, we built that beach, we devegetated that dune. What the mayor and city manager will be talking to you about is how you execute amid chaos, because every day is chaos, particularly in a town of so many visitors, short-term vacation rentals, and open container laws, and who comes to the beach and who should come to the beach, and the fact that demographic growth of a radius of 2 hours around Tybee. Let's say 2 hours is you'll come to the beach for a day. Outside of 2 hours, you could go to Charleston or South Carolina, or you could go to Jacksonville, right? If you take that radius, the estimated demographic growth is double digits over the next 10 years. Double digits. And Chatham County itself has risen like that in the last 10 years. And let's not forget our residents. Okay. As some of you may know, if you've done any of this work, it's difficult to get the populace to pay attention to something that isn't right in front of them, because God knows they're concerned about a whole host of things every day. But as soon as you put it in their backyard, you're going to get their attention. And it's often, didn't know, it's often why there. It's, I want to be part, in effect, I want to be part of the planning process. I want to have some decision rights, even though that's difficult. In our case, as we built the dunes, restored the beach, and we do other flood mitigation efforts, it's around access to the beach, which has been defined as I walk straight from my house to the beach, carrying my stuff, don't make me go around, don't make me go up and down. And so-called view sheds, my line of sight. Now that's actually not a thing. There's nothing in property rights that say you have a right to a view, but that's what people buy their property based on. And so when you suddenly, they spend the money they're spending in Tidal to build a condo, and then you put a dune up, they're not really happy. So you end up with tremendous amount of communication need. You do it a lot, you need to do it even more. This is an example of city council meetings where this is all brought to their attention. This happened to be during the pandemic, so we're all guarded. One of the cycles to consider as we manage the tensions of economic growth and environment is when and how to include the public, because some of these decisions we need to make will be very difficult. So you need a public will, political will to make them done. The only way you're going to get that is for people to be informed. I work with Joe Gamble here from UGA on that all the time. How you educate people, how you bring people in to inform them, how you do outreach to tell them what you're going to do. Huge issue. And people continue to do the strangest things. We had no longer planted 170,000 sea oats on those dunes, and people were up there picking these 2-inch plugs out and using them as lawn darts. 500 new plantings were. In fact, I tell you again, you put a big mound of sand, just plain sand anywhere, and it attracts everyone, I don't care their age. If they can climb up that sand dune, they're going to climb up that sand dune. We're very proud of the work that we've done. We are accomplishing the city's long-term plan. We are doing this to build our coastal resilience. We are gratified that our work has been recognized nationally. So the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan was funded in part by Sea Grant, UGA, Sea Grant. So that kicked us off. Most of our work is supported by a $5 million grant that we got from the state through the Department of Community Affairs. The state, back in 2018, gave us and 2 other municipalities money basically to restore your beach, build your dunes, fix your problems. And we have been able to use that money. We've been very good stewards of that money, and it's enabled us to do these projects. We've been recognized by the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine for our efforts around flood mitigation. We spoke at their annual conference at the end of 2019. We were awarded the Best Restored Beach in America last year in 2020 by the American Beach and Shore and Beach Preservation Association, which is the national body of coastal engineers and folks interested in the coast. We actually were used as a case study by our Department of Natural Resources. You may not know that the NOAA funds, I think it's 35 state DNRs, Department of Natural Resources around the country. They actually fund them. Every 7 to 9 years, they do an evaluation to see how that money's being used. Our local DNR asked to use us as their example of effective community support and partnership. We were delighted to do that, and we hosted NOAA. As part of that outcome, we were able to get some DNR Coastal Incentive Grant money. We've also been asked to write a how-to best practices book that NOAA intends to distribute across the country. I've talked to you about the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant that's supporting our back river. We have the FEMA grants for the house raising and the stormwater management plan and the tide gates. We work closely with your Skidaway Institute of Oceanography. They actually come out 4 times a year plus 1 storm event and monitor everything we've built on the dunes and beach from the north to the south with high-resolution drones. At this point, they've been doing it a year. We've got them for another year. They can take that data, put it into their model, and show us a 3D model of where the sand is accreting and where it's eroding. Fabulous. Then Georgia Southern University, because we had a bare naked dune, they said, could we come in and do some plant experiments, density experiments, type of plants. There is no best practice for dune vegetation. So could we find some? And of course we welcome that help, so we're working with them. And I saved the best for last. University of Georgia and the Corps of Army Engineers. We're working with a host of your schools, and we can't say enough about the close working partnership that we've had with everybody from University of Georgia. And we welcome even more, and we hope the partnership lasts a long time, because what you bring in terms of skills and experience and just resources has been so helpful to Tybee. We also are working closely with the Corps of Army Engineers, who used to nourish our beach every 7 to 10 years and will no longer do it after 2024. An issue for the country is the Corps is slowly but surely ending all of their agreements, whether they're riverine or coastal shore. Their economics do not support a cost benefit. Problematic for us. We're working with them on how we can keep them in play and how they can continue to work with us. But I bring that up because they sponsor something called Engineering with Nature, and the University of Georgia is a significant part of that effort too. So I feel like we've got the Corps surrounded between the work that we're doing. So that's what we've done, and let me tell a little bit about Tybee as you listen to Shirley and Shawn. So Tybee is a council manager government. The mayor and the council set policy. They are elected every 4 years on Tybee, and it's staggered every 2. We just had an election. There are 6 council people plus the mayor. They are responsible for budget and spending, for planning, and they supervise the city manager, the city attorney, and the clerk of council. They are elected. The city manager, he runs the city day to day. He is hired and appointed. He executes the council's plan. He reports back on progress. He does recommend budget as they consider finalizing the budget. And he has all the department heads reporting to him, all the functional areas. So the slide I showed, thinking about residents and visitors and do we and don't we and where's the money coming, that's a combination of the 2 of them. The mayor more on council and the political will of getting enough votes to get this stuff done. And then some of the executional issues about the dune and the Corps and the other things is Shawn and his department heads. So how is Tybee adapting to sea level rise? The mayor and the city manager work very closely together on the issues, broadly speaking, that affect the island, the economy. Who's bringing us money and where are we spending money? And there's a big divide on Tybee between visitors and residents. The environment. Infrastructure, the impact of all those visitors every summer on streets, on trash, on water consumption. The taxes, revenues, and costs. About half of Tybee's revenue is actually parking, and that's visitors. Residents have free parking. And the property taxes for Tybee are extremely low. Most of our property taxes go to Chatham County. And generally speaking, most of these issues become a, quote, quality of life issue, however those people are defining it, and it can be very complex. And while they do this, then, they're dealing with the messiness of the way we run things in the United States. So the mayor has to help manage 6 council people, all of whom are residents, all of whom have grown up there, all of whom are interested in this minutest detail about what people are doing and how they're doing it, and will take the calls of the residents She's got the city attorneys trying to give them advice, trying to keep them on the straight and narrow, but yet there are things to be done. The council clerk, which sort of keeps the council organized and gets the meetings running on time. Shawn has all of his department heads, police, fire, public works, parking is a department on Tybee, those kinds of things. You have a whole group of residents. Of the 3,000 residents, maybe there are 300 who are activists and involved in, as Gillen said today, is appreciate government. They appreciate that if they voice their opinion, government will respond. You have visitors. We estimate that over the course of the year, this year, through December, we'll have more than 3 million vehicles on that island over the course of the year. That's up 12% over 4 years ago. All vehicles. Now, that includes trucks and delivery, but still, number of vehicles. And oh yes, slowly but surely, the seas are rising above us. That is Tybee. That is the situation, the stage, as I said, that is set as you listen to Shawn and Shirley, how Tybee is adapting. What could possibly go wrong? So I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to start with whoever wants to go, and I just would ask you to think about policy, council, politics, get it done, influence policy and politics, right?
I'd be happy to, thank you. First of all, I want to make sure you can hear me okay? Good, thank you. First, thank you, Jill, this whole team. I mean, the University of Georgia team that's been working with us, amazing. You inspire me, motivate me, and I can't tell you how much your influence over the past, since 2016, what a difference you've helped us make. I'd just like to see how many people have actually been to Tybee by show of hands in the room. Okay, good. We've got Tybee-ites here. And I hope that the people who are watching on Zoom, if you haven't been to Tybee, that you will come and visit. Tybee truly is beautiful. Well, first of all, a barrier island. We all know you're not supposed to build on a barrier island, but Tybee did. And we have treasures. We have the ocean, as Alan said, the marshes, the creeks, the rivers, the marine life, we have it all. But our greatest treasures truly are the residents. The residents who've chosen, that didn't grow up there, who've chosen Tybee as their home. The businesses who support and give us the resources that we need to sustain our lives on Tybee. And the visitors, especially the visitors, and by far they are the majority, the respectful visitors who come and enjoy the beach and enjoy what we have to offer. And we want them to come back, and we actually want them to live there permanently. So we are very, very, very fortunate to have a little piece of paradise. And I think that sometimes we forget just how fortunate we are until we have an opportunity to visit other places. We had today, Shawn and Alan and I had the opportunity, thanks to Jill, to visit your local government. But I have to say, after meeting with governments, I always say, you know what, I'll take Tybee. We'll take their challenges, because it's amazing what you guys and what this community is dealing with, and I respect it so much. The beauty of Athens is unforgettable. It's been many years since I was here, and I had forgotten the hills and the beauty of the changing of the seasons. On Tybee, our season pretty much is when we get to see the marsh change, yellow, orange, then green. That's kind of pretty much it. We do have some trees that change, but not like this. So you're very fortunate to have such a beautiful, beautiful city. Tybee has experienced so much change. Next year, Tybee will celebrate its 135th birthday. So to think about all of the changes that have happened, and all of the challenges, whether it's weather, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's right now we're seeing a lot of, we've all experienced what it's like to go through a pandemic. You know, Tybee has a book on how to deal with hurricanes, so we're prepared for that. We at least know what's going to happen. Here comes a hurricane, we're going to leave, we know what we're going to have to do when we come back, if it's still there. With a pandemic during COVID-19, nobody knew what to expect. So we were challenged just like everyone else, but our residents, our city manager, our staff, they rose to the challenge, and we put things in place that were necessary. And as I look out and see that we're all still wearing masks, if we haven't already been fully vaccinated, we certainly encourage that. But to really touch quickly on some of the things that I'd like for Shawn to get into the daily operations of what we're doing regarding resiliency, sustainability. Tybee has always been, since I've been in government, I feel we've been very lucky that we've had leadership, although very, very, very diverse. But at the end of the day, when it comes to major things, we were the first community, the first municipality in our county, in Chatham County. There are 11 municipalities, including Savannah. And Tybee was the first to establish a recycling program. Way back, we had curbside recycling. We were one of the first municipalities to become a water-first community. We were one of the first municipalities to actually start looking into what are we going to do about changing sea rising, sea level. You know, what are we going to do about, now we have to think about what are we going to do now that we can no longer have a contract with the federal government to renourish our beach. So we're starting new partnerships. We value the importance, the necessity, and the privilege of working together with our local governments, with our state governments, and with our federal governments, with our nonprofit communities. We are very, very blessed to have wonderful sense of history. Tybee's preservation, not only with environmental, but also with our historic preservation. When you come to Tybee, if you haven't visited, make sure you visit our lighthouse. It is 174 roughly steps, beautiful view, panoramic at the top. We have a historic theater, the Tybee Post Theater, one of the oldest in Georgia. It was restored, the city of Tybee saved it back in 2000. So now you can come there and see movies, plays, music. We have the most amazing Marine Science Center. It's new, and we also are very happy that we have a maritime academy for children. It's a charter school from kindergarten to 8th grade. So we have so much to offer, and we want to keep it like that. So looking at resiliency and sustainability, those are words that a lot of times people are a little like bleary-eyed when you start talking about that. But sometimes it's as simple as just thinking about being healthy. How healthy can we be? It's very, very sad sometimes when we go to the beach and we see our visitors or maybe some residents who forget to take their trash with them. And something as simple as looking at a group of people releasing balloons in the air to celebrate a party or mourn a loss. You know, they fail to understand what those balloons and the lanterns that go up, they have to come down, and they're going to come down probably in our oceans and our marine life are impacted. So the city of Tybee, our policies, some of the policies we've set, that is no longer allowed. You will be fined for that type of behavior, but we have to educate people. That is my preference, is to educate people on why we're not allowing these types of things. And I think that that's a big piece of the puzzle, and just making sure that people understand it is not to be punitive, it's to be to protect our environment. So some of the policies that our city council and I have set include things like, again, the recycling program. Sadly, back in 2018, we all know that China quit taking a lot of recycled material, so we had to really stop our curbside recycling because it just wasn't feasible. But instead, the council set a new program. We've looked at recycling from a citywide perspective. We have 3 or 4 different recycling centers that people can go and take certain items that we then make sure get recycled properly. So we go through a lot of different policies that we try to make sure that our public is aware of. I'm certainly not going to sit here and go into detail, but we have a lot of land use and a lot of ordinances that we ask our city manager and his staff, our staff, to make sure that they enforce. And having said that, I think now is a good time to turn over to the city manager, Shawn, who, believe me, hardest job ever. As mayor, I get to get a lot of calls from citizens and from council people. But one of my favorite stories is a resident calling to tell me that they're really upset their trash didn't get picked up. They don't like it and they're not happy with it, and they didn't put the trash can back where it should be. And I said, you know, I'm sorry, but what you could do is you can call the company that we have a contract with. They'll take your call and they'll set you up. So call them directly. And the person said, well, I knew that, but I thought I would start at the bottom and work my way to the top. So that's kind of how we do it on Tybee. But Shawn will tell you and explain to you a lot of the daily operations and how we do, thanks to our staff, get things done. But thank you all very much for your attention and for your interest in Tybee, and most importantly, in environmental ethics. I love that. Shawn.
Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Make sure the mic's picking me up. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm going to apologize in advance, but I am a recovering politician. I started out in this line of work as a mayor. I got elected mayor of my hometown when I was 26 years old. That was my first job out of college. It's full-time. You were the city manager. You hired and fired everybody in that particular role. And I'm also a recovering college professor. So Alan probably got a hook. He's going to pull me off when my time is up.
Yeah, I'm watching it.
But don't get me started on public finance and different public policy, because I love talking about that stuff. So that's what I became passionate about after I was a mayor, and I went back to graduate school at the University of Kentucky as a graduate student. But I'm still a Georgia fan, because that's where my tax dollars go. But but anyway, so what we're talking about is the sustainability issues and the resiliency issues. And sustainability is issue, there's really a catchphrase that started back in my world, in the world of city managers. We have meetings regionally and nationally. We all get together and we talk about city manager stuff. And sustainability was always a topic starting about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And to me, it became a very nebulous word. They said it so many times, it lost its meaning. So I love how we talk about resiliency on Tybee Island, because it is not just that we can sustain our existence into the future, but it also means that we can bounce back from a disaster. We are resilient. So when we get a flood, so we can let the water come in, it does its thing, and the water goes out. We're not going to hold the ocean back forever. And the sea level rise issue is one that we talk about a lot. And I always have this little speech I give about, there's a lot of debate over that. I don't know what your politics are. I don't really care. I'm a nonpartisan. I have to deal with both Democrats, Republicans, very liberals, very extremely liberal people, extremely conservative people in my job. So I have to be able to walk in all of those worlds and understand it. And so what the debate over sea level rise and climate change is, I don't care. what I see on Tybee Island is more frequent high tides based on the tide gauge at Fort Pulaski. I also see that. That's last Sunday.
Yeah.
That's not a hurricane. That is a king tide. That is just the water coming in because nature said we're going to do this today. So I've got more frequent events like that on Tybee Island. So we have to address that now on the ground in Tybee. And it's not that, I'm not saying I don't care about climate change or I don't care about the sea level rise. It's just like, you guys can go on and debate all you want. I've got some issues I have to deal with right now. And we need to talk to our federal agencies. So we talked to things about speeding up the funding, speeding up the planning. And the work we've done with UGA has really accelerated things. But you saw the picture of the house going up, the lifting of the house. We're in year 4 of that grant program. We have 6 houses up out of 63. 6 in 4 years. Because we got 12 funded. It's taken a long time to get them up. They all went up pretty quickly. That's moving along. But we haven't even heard on the other grant, which is 49 homes, and we're in year 4. So when I had the opportunity to testify before Congress's Environmental Committee, and that's the message I tried to leave them with, is that you need to fix that. That is too long. People are, some of them are out of their homes. Some of them or the homes are so damaged they can't get back into them. Some of them in the next group are not. They've never been flooded, but they're eligible to be raised. But they're in year 4, waiting for this to happen. We've already had 2 other, well, since Irma, we've had 1 other hurricane darn near hit us, Dorian. We evacuated the city. I stayed on the island because the storm shifted out to sea the night before it was supposed to make landfall. But one little slight woggle on when it's coming up by Florida, and that thing's a direct hit. And it was a Category 3. That was a big one. I love telling the story. I was here 93 days on the job. Hurricane Irma hit. And I remember it was about day 85. And the headlines in the newspaper was, largest storm in recorded history. And I was like, well, this might as well happen. Why not? Let's do this thing. And yeah, I'm from the Midwest. You know, I'm used to tornadoes. The sirens go off. You got 30 seconds to get in your basement or you're dying. This thing, you sat for a week waiting for this monster to come at you. And you're like, what are we? So we're just getting everything ready, getting off the island, getting everybody going. And so we saw the effects of the after effects of that when the flooding came in. It really catapulted these efforts. So Matthew hit in October 16th of 2016, September 11th, 2017, Irma hit. So 11 months, less than 11 months. We got hit by 2 hurricanes. And these were side swipes. We got lucky. Irma, we actually stayed, my team, the critical workforce team, stayed on the island because it moved inland. And actually went towards Statesboro more than us, and that's our evac point. So we stayed on the island while this thing went inland. And then, but the flooding came in, we understood where it was at. We needed to act quickly. So we showed that dune. So you see from the pier southward, we built that dune as fast as we could. And we had some complaints. Why didn't you wait for the beach renourishment before you built that? You know, we were very intentional about this because memory is short. We were, 2019, we were 2 years out from Irma. People were already starting to forget about it. So we wanted to act on the urgency that was still in the public agenda at that point and build the dune and show that it can work. We can do this. So that is trucked in sand. How many truckloads? 1,500 trucks. Loading sand from Effingham County down to Tybee, driving onto the beach and dumping it down there and shaping it. And then the beach renourishment came in, and then we had, okay, now we're going to build the dunes. We solved a lot of problems with this one because we knew what the complaints were going to be. One was the beach access. The traditional, I'm going to walk out my front door, walk to the ocean, and there's nothing going to get in my way, no plant life, no nothing. And another great story I love to tell, I love, when we moved to Tybee, it's just like I went from living in Atlanta where I had an hour commute to a 3-minute walk to my office from my house. But also, Tybee's in a lot of movies. And if you want to go back and see the difference that beach renourishment has made, go back and watch the classic Burt Reynolds movie, Gator. And spoiler alert, but he gets in a fight with the bad guy at the end. He wins. He beats up Jerry Reed. In the parking lot of what is now Hotel Tybee, it's these parking lots here. There is no dune at all where we have naturally formed dunes that are now 15 feet high, 3 deep. There were no dunes. But when they have their big fight scene at the end of the movie, you see a black pipe running down the beach. That is the pipe from the very first beach renourishment on Tybee Island in 1974. We're coming up on the 50-year agreement the mayor mentioned. That's when it started, and you can see those dunes weren't even there. There was nothing. It was a straight shot out from the parking lot to the beach. So when they laid the sand down, then there was dunes. So when we talk about where we're putting sand, why we're trying to build this protective layer of the beach and the dunes, we're trying to defend the front end of the island. So now, shifting gears real quick, then we can get into the panel discussion, but we're taking a three-pronged approach here. We defend, we adapt, and we retreat. Those are the three things you can do when dealing with sea level rise and dealing with more frequent high tide events, which is the way I frame it, because that's what I'm dealing with. Is it sea level rise? I don't know. But I'm dealing with, I'm not a climatologist, but I can read the data off the tide gauge and tell you that over the last 30 years, it has been an exponential growth in more frequent higher tide events. And they've been taking that data since the 1930s. You saw it level, and about the 1970s and 1980s, it started to spike. And that's still going up. So that, I'm like, you don't have to show me any more. The data pretty much tells the story. So we adapt or we defend. We figured out the front part of the island. And as Alan explained, figuring out that back side of the island is going to be a bigger challenge. And we could talk about why. But the retreat one is not something that Americans are really good at. We don't like to call the sound retreat and get out of there. But we deal with it in a smaller scale in our zoning ordinance. And the mayor talked to you 20 years ago, you set setback requirements. You set minimum lot sizes, stuff like that, and to build on that allow fewer buildings to go up. But we still have a lot of work to do there because you can still build a lot more homes on Tybee, even though it seems like every lot is being built on. You could still almost double the housing capacity on Tybee based on the current zoning. And our carrying capacity study shows that. So that's a problem that we have to deal with. So we have to come up with a solution to these things. So you defend, you adapt by raising homes, you adapt by shifting where the water can go, that sort of thing. We can't really defend the backside of the island the same way. So before I get off on a couple more tangents, I guess we could stop and start. Oh, what time we got? How much time? We take some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'll stop there and I can ramble on for hours on this stuff. So thank you, Al.
Yes, thank you. Questions? Yeah, please.
When you were talking about the vehicular traffic and how many people come to the island, do you have any like shuttle services or anything to reduce the number of people coming onto the island in vehicles?
It's a great question that comes up every year, and I'll tell you why. That comes up in the carrying capacity study, it comes up in our master plan. The challenge is this. How do you get to the bus? Where do you park your car? Who can go there? That bus then is going to be stuck in traffic. And when you come here on a June Saturday, I always thought 50,000 people on a June Saturday was an exaggeration, but we've been getting some data that tracks cell phone usage on the island, and we can tell you exactly how many people are on the island, where they are on the island, and how they're behaving. It's kind of freaky, but 60,000 people to 75,000 people on a June Saturday is what we're talking about. So that's a lot of cars. So that highway is backed up bumper to bumper by 10 o'clock in the morning. My family and I, we just adapt. We don't go off the island on Saturday. Every once in a while, my daughter will have a rehearsal or something for theater on a Saturday afternoon. I'm like, oh, well, might as well go to Walmart or something and spend a few hours because it's a long trek back. But you have that effect. So to have an effective transit system onto the island, you really have to go back to rail or to some sort of shuttle service. I'm actually going to a meeting on Friday they're talking about a ferry service again to the island, but it is logistically challenging. because of the volume of people we get to the island and the volume of vehicles.
Also, just to tap in on that, Chatham County does have a CAT, Chatham Authority Transit, and Tybee did buy into, when I say buy into, there was taxes that were paid to have that service years ago, and apparently I wasn't on Tybee at that time, but from what I understand, there wasn't enough use that justified the expense. And the other thing to be aware of, the road to Tybee, Highway 80, or as people like to call it, the Tybee Road, it's a 2-lane. Now, over the years, there have been former mayors, different people trying to work with Georgia Department of Transportation to get the road expanded to 4 lanes. There's been meetings, there's been all kinds of things. Well, about 2 years ago, the GDOT had several meetings, stakeholder meetings with our community, asked our city council members, okay, what would you like to see? Would you like to see a 2-lane? And would you like to see a lane where you merge at the Bull River Bridge and the Lazaretto Bridge? Or would you like to see, 4 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes? Well, everybody pretty much voted for everything except 2 lanes. So Georgia Transportation decided that they would go with 2 lanes. Well, you know what happened? Honestly, we've had fewer accidents. We have had, certainly the traffic continues to increase, but for whatever reason, I think in talking to people, including thinking for myself, when I'm on that 2-lane, I'm not worried about, am I going to pass this person? I'm going to try to merge, because no, I can't. It's a 2-lane. So what do I do instead? I enjoy the view. The marsh on both sides, gorgeous. So I'm talking to people, talking to visitors, talking to residents, and by far, I would say 90–95% that I'm hearing from are really happy with the 2-lane. But as far as the bus service goes, or the transit, in conversations with Chatham County, our commissioners, this came up recently because we are talking about a T-SPLOS transportation special local option sales tax that will be up for next year for the voters to vote on. And this is coming up again. And one of the things, even those proponents who want public transportation on Tybee understand, unless we can have a lane that's devoted to buses, it will not work. It will not work for the majority of people. And also Tybee, we have a lot of hospitality industry. So a lot of people would have challenges, getting seasonal help. And a lot of people drive in from Savannah or from Wilmington Island. They would love to have, transportation, public transportation. But even that, getting to work on time, having some kind of consistency, that is also a situation that we just can't really depend on. So does that help kind of answer your question?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about all
yeah.
many of those factors.
Thank you.
Isn't there proposed, or the next time they raise it, because they're raising 80 pretty regular, did they propose putting a shoulder and a bike lane along certain sections of 80? And maybe possibly you could use that shoulder as a bus lane when it's not being, because I know from driving on that road, it's pretty dangerous, especially on that bridge. There's no shoulder whatsoever.
The proposal didn't get into using it as a bus lane that I'm aware of.
Yeah, no, but I was saying, would that be possible?
Well, probably not, and I'll tell you why. The project was one big project, and they came to us and showed us a 2-lane expansion of the road with some bike lanes and some better shoulders, and raising it up a little bit, the causeway itself, that's the road bed. Because there are areas where it floods, like that picture we had up there. It floods less frequently because they did raise it a little bit when they repaved. So what they're running into is environmental challenges on that. So the biggest environmental hurdle they're having to get over is how do you get the terrapins over the road during breeding season or whatever season it is when they're already getting hit by cars. But if you raise that up 3 or 4 or 5 feet, they've got a bigger challenge to get up over the top of it. And if you widen it, it becomes more dangerous for the turtle population, because they just dumped fill into this marsh back in the 20s and built a road with no consideration of water flow or environmental impacts when they did it. And now we have a lengthy environmental process. So what GDOT did is they broke the project into 3. The 2 bridges, Lazarotta Creek Bridge and Bull River Bridge, and the causeway. Lazarotta Creek Bridge is now in their plan to be funded 2023. So they should break ground on a new Lazarotta Creek Bridge in 2023. It'll be 2 traffic lanes, 2 breakdown lanes, a separated 8-foot bike and pedestrian lane. For us, that's important because of, and Bull River is for 24, 25. They have bumped that out a little bit because of environmental impacts and right-of-way acquisition, buying the land they need to build the new bridge. The separated bike lane will be 8 feet wide. So when we just hired a new fire chief, one of the questions I had for him, let's talk about ambulance service. And the mayor has made that make sure I understand how important it is to enhance our ambulance service and EMT capacity on the island, because there's a lot of times we have a 30-minute wait for an ambulance. If there's an accident on the bridge and the weather doesn't allow for helicopter flight and you have a medical emergency, you're stuck on the island. That's a bad deal. We actually had to helicopter someone off the beach for the first time my first year here. They landed a helicopter on the beach because there was an accident on the bridge. They couldn't get the person off. So what we're doing is that when we purchase our equipment, our fire apparatus, if we get a rescue vehicle, it's going to be one that can go down an 8-foot lane. So if we have to, we can get you over the bridge at least into Fort Pulaski to a waiting ambulance or something like that. So we're really piecemealing it together like that.
Yeah,
the causeway is a long way off.
Yeah,
if that happens in the next 10 years, it'll be a miracle.
Because if there's an 8-foot bike lane all the way down, you could in theory...
We could in theory drive you right off the island and take you to Memorial or Candler, wherever we gotta go. But it's an ongoing challenge, but they're coming, the new bridges are coming. So we have to prepare for light flight, we have to prepare for getting Coast Guard boat to get you off the island. The MRS is the Marine Rescue Squad, which is a volunteer organization on the island, things like that.
And also the Tybee Road, the causeway is about 5 miles from Bull River to Lazarotta, yet there's multiple municipalities that have to work together. The Chatham County, the state of Georgia, of course, and then different environmental groups that are concerned, obviously, about the birds, about the marshes. So, it's always a challenge to. It just takes longer. So, but we are making slow progress.
When we talk about sustainability, the mayor had a great history on the four-lane Tybee Road. There's bumper stickers. Yeah. Let's say that. These same people who are lobbying for the 4-lane Tybee Road are the same ones complaining about all the people on the island. I guarantee it, the same guy. He's probably got a bumper sticker that says 4-lane Tybee Road and no STVR. But the simple fact is this, and what she explained was the counterintuitive nature of GDOT taking out the passing lanes on Highway 80 when they repaved it has actually made traffic flow better, reduced accidents. It isn't standstill traffic anymore on a Saturday, it's moving. Now, anecdotally, we can say that. So right now, GDOT is doing a traffic study for, when you come over Lazarotta Creek Bridge, it turns into 4 lanes. So we have a 2-lane highway into a 4-lane road that goes through our down all the way into our city. So you get from a lane, then you can turn into a racetrack and drive as fast as you want to get to Tybee Street. So
it's only a 3-mile island, so you've got people speeding down a 4-lane to get to another 4-lane to get 2 miles. Correct. And then can't find a parking place.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here coming in online I wanted to get to. One from an MPA student is saying, I heard a lot of these projects are getting funded by grants and partnerships, but I'm curious how sea level rise adaptation and climate change planning is showing up in the city budget.
Okay.
Public finance question? Yeah. All right.
Do you notice I'm like this? But the council does, each year we do strategic plans, and we look at the needs of what we want to achieve as a city for the residents, for the visitors. We take our, we work with the city manager, and then we say, okay, we want this. Now you go back, talk to your department heads, find out how, if they're in agreement, and if there are other things that they need, and how much money is it going to take. And then, of course, having a consultant like Alan has made such a huge difference in the city getting so much grant money that really, I can't even tell you how much, I'm sure you can, how much money and how much partnerships, how many partnerships we've developed by making a decision to put money in our budget to have this position that we can then spin off. And Shawn, if you want to elaborate or
right, so
correct me.
That's one area that we do. We get the professional help we need. So in my budget, I have a professional services line item that is gone up over the years because these are the sorts of technical help we need. The second piece of this is, drainage, stormwater drainage, which is part of the sea level rise. We do not have a stormwater fee. Some cities do. So we have to fund that through our general fund, which is parking fees, hotel motel tax, property tax. Hotel motel tax and parking fees is almost 60% of our revenue budget. That's a big chunk of money that is exported burden to the visitors to the island. So that is where the money in the future is going to have to come. When we finish our plan to do stormwater management, then when we do the implementation, a big chunk is going to have to come out of that. It's going to be intentionally budgeted. Because as the mayor mentioned, the 50-year agreement with the Corps of Engineers coming to an end in 2024 to re-nourish the beach, we may have to go on our own. So my recommendation in the next year's budget, by charter, I put together a draft budget for the council to basically outline, here's everything to put the resources toward where we think you want them to go. Now let's move some money around. The draft budget's going to have a transfer to a beach renourishment fund of a pretty good chunk of money, be it $500,000 or $1 million a year. We're going to have to start setting aside because by the regular cycle, 7 to 8 year renourishment cycles, that's 2026 or 2027. That's I guess, so basically we have 5 years to prepare for a full renourishment, which can be $13 to $15 million. So with no federal partner anymore, we have got to prepare to do that and take care of that in on our own. So the mayor has proposed additioning fees for movies that film on the island because it's ridiculously low to film on the beach. And then also part of our hotel motel tax is now by state law transferred to that special fund for beach renourishment.
And also some of the grant money we have been fortunate enough to learn about comes through Georgia Municipal Association. They send us different types of grant opportunities, safety, homeland security, and also the state of Georgia has a department that we get a lot of community funding. And Alan, I want to just give him another high five for all of the not only grants that he's found, but as Shawn mentioned, Tybee is going to have to start looking at how we're going to refund our beach renourishment. Instead of waiting 7 years, we're looking at how can we do this when the erosion happens? How can we do this in a more regular cycle? And through partnerships that Alan has helped sustain and develop, and as Shawn as well, with the Department of Natural Resources, with the Corps of Engineers, with the Coast Guard. So with all of the Georgia ports, all of these entities are critical as we start looking at progressive ways of renourishing our beach. And because it is a big part of, let's face it, it's recreational, but first and foremost, it's for the safety and protection of people and property. But obviously recreation does come into it. Alan, did you?
I had one thing, and that's a really good question. I appreciate the inquiry. It gives me an opportunity to make sure everybody understands that federal grants are typically, for instance, FEMA will give you 75% against your 25%. The state DNR grants would be 1-to-1, give you 50%, 50%. Corps of Army Engineers, 50%, 50%. The reason we talk about the grants is because it alleviates the financial burden, but make no mistake about it, Tybee is putting its money into its coastal resources. It's just not an $18 million project. They put in $5 million of an $18 million project. And that's the difference between getting it done and not getting it done. Thank you for that question.
Funding beach renourishment, funding these projects. I mean, this talk is titled like Equitable Sea Level Rise Adaptation, and I feel like I have not heard on how you're making this equitable, who is paying for it. I mean, I know that these residents don't want to pay for it. I have lived in Outer Banks in North Carolina, from coastal North Carolina. I know all about beach renourishment, and people, you're going to have to do it, the city's going to have to do it, but also adaptation retreat, how do you make it equitable? And I'd love to really get into how you are focusing on that, not just financially, but socially.
So fabulous, let me start, fabulous question, thank you very much. Tybee's demographics hide some of the issues that we have on the island. Tybee, at the last census, not the most recent one, I'm not up to date, but the 3,000 residents had an average age of 57. That is very old in the United States, to have an average age of 57. Most of us are retirees. Okay? The median income is $67,000. That's very wealthy in the United States as a median income. Okay? And you have this perception of people living on the coast, at least in Tybee, is wealthy, and you see house prices going up to $1 million. Okay. Those are median numbers. What you don't see, Tybee, and we are 99% white. Okay, we have a very small population of colored or ethnic, but they are there. But we have a large population of Tybeeites, I guess, people who have lived on Tybee for generations. Okay, their families grew up there, their families' families. Okay, they tend to live on what are called Tybee cottages at grade. They tend not to have a mortgage because it's passed through the family, so they tend not to afford the flood insurance. They tend to be on the marsh because that's where they built, on the back river, so they are the most vulnerable. They are the least likely to raise their house. They are the least likely to have insurance. They're the highest likely to have mold in their houses right now. Okay. And because they've lived on Tybee their entire lives, where are they going to go? Tybee's too small, and the only high ground is already taken. Okay. Ethics connotes to me typically choices, often associated with right and wrong, but I like to think about it as the tension of inherent conflict, which we talk about. So you have very wealthy people coming into Tybee, retiring there, bringing their experience of Atlanta or wherever they're coming from to the people who've been there forever. You have the residents who live there, but you have a lot of investors who are invested there, who don't live there permanently, but use that rental income for their purposes. One of the things we're trying to do is we are too small. Okay? We're just an island 3.5 miles long, 3,000 people. We need bigger geographic consideration, and we need more collaboration. Number one, our issues are replicable. Our issues are across Chatham County and Savannah. And quite frankly, as I said, up and down the coast there in the southeast. But we find, and we are building these advisory groups and trying to engage all of the other entities, Chatham County, the city of Savannah itself, and the surrounding cities that Shawn talked about within Chatham County, other coastal counties who all share this issue. The thought being, number one, is we share the common issue of your equitable exchange, and we don't have a good answer to that. Savannah wrestles with it all the time. They have a big population. Okay? So we learn from them. When you look for grants, the federal government, particularly in their infrastructure, and if they pass more money, is looking for biggest impact. So Tybee might be an interesting proof of concept place, but if you're going to make a mark, you have to make it big. The only way to make it big is to cover a lot of geography. The only way for Tybee to even start to begin to address some of the equity issues that are going to be inevitable is to line up and make it a larger population with a larger geographic scope, in my opinion. That's what drives our collaboration. We are sensitive to it as we consider, for instance, the flood mitigation that you all are doing for us on the back river. Those of you who have been there, you got some serious flooding issues with the most vulnerable population. And we wrestle with how best to address that. We're doing a public survey of the 3 surrounding counties to try to understand what the public at large willingness to pay is and what they, generally speaking, either you live there or you visit Tybee, value in terms of recreational, whether you live there or not, recreation and the like. Those are all ways for us to try to expand the scope, to start to try to achieve some sort of equity, meaning you're caring for the most vulnerable because they are there for historic reasons. It's the same with Savannah. We don't have any answers for you, but it's, we were talking with Athens Clark County today. We were sharing some of these stories because Athens Clark County has some issues around vulnerable populations. And how do you make sure that the monies you get are appropriately applied to those folks? And unfortunately, those folks are the least able to take advantage of some of the things that we might offer. It's a conundrum. I mean, otherwise people would have it.
It's like the FEMA grant for raising houses is a 10% match. And if it could cost anywhere, it could cost up to $500,000 to raise one house. Right. And FEMA will fund that as long as the benefit cost ratio works out. But you got to come up with 50 grand. And not everybody can do that. So we need to be able to work with folks to get them the equity loan or that they might need to do that. But we had 2 people drop out of the 12 houses that and the main reason was they didn't want to have to come up with that match. So you got the most vulnerable population, you got the most needed place where we need to lift the houses, and the least ability to afford the match. So that is a challenge that we're trying to come up with a solution to. So.
One thing we are doing that is innovative. This is cutting edge, so we'll see where this goes. But when FEMA comes in and insures risk, wildfires, flooding, whatever it is, they're laying that risk off to reinsurance companies. The private reinsurance companies are standing behind them, taking the highest risk, right? So think about I just don't know where you are on the finance side, so forgive me, but you take an insurance policy, you have a deductible. It's what you're willing to pay, right? Then the insurance company steps in and pays for your losses over that. They have other insurance companies behind them who take even higher losses. And those losses are laid off to the general public and investors in cat bonds, catastrophic bonds. Okay. So FEMA comes in with billions of dollars of exposure. They're not taking that. They're laying that off. We are having conversations directly with those reinsurers who ultimately face our risk, our catastrophe risk, about how we might work with them to develop pilot projects. That would be reputable. And how we might work with them to help fund our vulnerable communities. Because we could pay insurance premiums. We could make this a cost of the community. Okay? And if that happens where the catastrophe hits them, we could provide them some low-cost financing. In effect, arbitrage that opportunity. The issue for Tybee and for any city, I would argue, is it brings to the fore the tension between the obligation of a city, and what is that? You can argue that might be a good class. Argue, what's your obligation as a mayor or a manager? I would argue it's to the majority of your population. I would argue it's absorb the hit and recover quickly, which means your critical infrastructure, water, power, sewer, right? I need to protect those. If in protecting those, I may have to put you further at risk. I may need to put individual citizens further at risk to protect most of the citizens. That's a huge ethical dilemma that cities face. One way to address that, right, is protect your infrastructure, build your green and gray infrastructure, and try to find some financing that you, the city, can help raise those houses of those vulnerable people. Because if you lift the house, you're in good shape. Roads might flood, but you're okay. Right? And up to this point, it's been individual, FEMA, you got a claim, FEMA come in, evaluate whether you do it or not, right? And take 4 years, as Shawn says, and maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And then they only come in with 90%, and you can't afford to do it. There are a lot of folks in this business looking at how you could speed that process up, get money into people's hands more quickly, let FEMA follow the federal process. And at the end of the day, right, if we could do that within our communities, it may take 5 or 6 or 7 years, but FEMA benefits. We've reduced our flood risk, and we're paying the premium. And we're doing that as a public service, not only to our community and what we owe as the critical infrastructure, but we are doing that as a service to our most vulnerable population. That's one idea, one thing we're exploring. We're nowhere near getting it done, but we're having some interesting conversations with people who get it, you know, and are willing to work with Tybee. And there again, why would they work with Tybee? We're small enough to get something done, okay? And we're way ahead of most people. So when they want metrics, we've got metrics. When they say, what are you building to? We can tell them what we're building to. But they're only using us to see if this works. They need to do the entire East Coast. They need to do every coastal city in the United States. They need to find a way for not just Tybee, but Chatham, coastal Georgia to the southeast up to New Jersey and New York and around Texas. And so one of the things we're doing is you gotta think outside the box, you gotta think beyond your community borders, you gotta think about where the vested interests are. There are a lot of interconnected players in this issue of climate change and resilience. And we're just trying to find, as Jill and I talked about, we're always just trying to find interested parties. And why are you interested? And what can you offer us? And what can we offer you?
I'll throw another wrench in the works. Gentrification, which is something that we're experiencing on Tybee for a variety of reasons. But if some of the things that we're talking about, raising homes and things like that, could accelerate that gentrification. You've got these homes that have been in the family for generations. They were basically fishing cottages, probably never intended to be a primary residence, but they are now. But there are two things we have to concern ourselves. Not only just the match, but one is Stevens Day is a law in our area. So when you go sign up for your homestead exemption, so Tybee has a healthy homestead exemption, it lops part of the value off the top of your property before they apply the tax rate to it. So your taxes are lower than they would be if you weren't homesteading. And you can only homestead one property, and so wherever your primary residence. So if you have a house in Atlanta and a house in Tybee, you can only homestead one of them. I live on Tybee. I've homesteaded my property. I also got the Stevens Day, which is it's a different thing. It's an assessment freeze. I'm sure my MPA student on the chat will understand this. At least I hope they do. An assessment freeze. So the value of my home has doubled in the last 4 years. But I pay taxes on less than what I paid for. So because it is frozen at a level, I think a 1999 level, unless I do a rehab of that house that's 50% of value or more. So if I raise that house, I could lose my Stevens Day exemption. All of a sudden I'm paying taxes on $1 million house instead of a $300,000 house. That's not my house, not worth $1 million. But you get the picture. The other piece is flood insurance. Come next April, Risk Assessment 2.0 will come out. That's FEMA's little terminology for we're going to jack your rates up, because we're going to now start assessing individual properties based on that property's risk of flooding. So no longer, like they changed the maps last 2019, August 18th, I remember, because my rates dropped. And my mortgage company said you no longer need the flood insurance. And it went from $2,100 a year to $500 a year. I'm keeping my flood insurance because it goes value. But if Risk Assessment 2.0 all of a sudden puts that back up at, say, $2,000, $3,000, we're going to have to do some math on that. Is it worth it? Irma hit, Matthew hit, water didn't touch my house. Well, maybe I can take the risk and just have a set aside so I can take my FEMA grant and do match my insurance. So there's all kinds of risk assessments that we'll have to do internally on our own house. But you can imagine if I raise that house, I have to have flood insurance. My rates might be up. I can't afford to live in this house anymore. Number one, my property taxes are too high, and my flood insurance is now too high. I didn't do this math before I agreed to do this. And all of a sudden, I got to sell and move off. And we've got another short-term rental on the island and a long-time resident who has to move off because they simply can't afford it. That's environmental ethics right there. That's the essence of what we're trying to prevent, is that gentrification of the island. You have to fix the problem, but the fix might be worse than the disease sort of scenario. It's like we got to be very careful about how we approach that, so we're not driving the people out of their homes because all of a sudden that home is too expensive to even live in. Even if you have no mortgage, you can't afford flood insurance, you can't afford the taxes that go on it every year.
And there will be people in the debate who look at the economics and say it's cheaper for the city to buy that house, no matter what it costs, and tear it to the ground and revert that land to marsh, than it is to try to protect those people in the marsh. Everyone is a spectrum of views, and they're all valid. And it's the challenge of the council and the staff to try to wrestle those.
Government's role, first and foremost, is public safety. Obviously, police, fire, and we have wonderful police and fire departments. Also infrastructure, public works, but you know, the affordability, affordable housing on Tybee, everybody has a different definition of what's affordable, obviously. But what most people think is affordable, when I say most people, I'm thinking about people who are working in the hospitality industry, people who are working for the city, people who are just, average people making average salaries, who would like to live at the beach, maybe who grew up there, or who fell in love with it, who would just want to be there. They can't afford it because, as has been mentioned, property rights, if you own a home, you have every right to, within the land use code, within what you're allowed to do in the ordinances, if you want to rent that home for a full time, you can do that. You can decide how much. If you want to rent it on a short-term basis, which you feel like is more profitable, you can do that. But the senses of the feeling of so many people on Tybee who've moved there over the years, or who, as Shawn said, had to find themselves selling because they couldn't afford the taxes, they couldn't afford the insurance or whatever. Now they're being forced to either decide to find another job off island, to find housing off island. One of the things we're looking at is in trying to explain to people how can we as a city offer incentives to people who own homes on Tybee that they would consider doing long-term rentals that were affordable. And we do have that option to investigate. However, the process, I'm learning, is quite lengthy, and many people who may have that option may not want to take the time to actually go through it. And Shawn, if you want to elaborate on how that happens.
In the state of Georgia, it's extraordinarily difficult to do anything like a tax abatement or anything like that, especially in residential. But we do have a DDA, a Downtown Development Authority, which has statutory authority to do certain things like that. It's not called a tax abatement, it's called a bonds for title transaction. It's thoroughly confusing. You have to turn title of the property over to the city, and you get it back again. It's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo and a lot of documents, an extraordinarily lengthy process, a lot of lawyers. I think the lawyers wrote the law thinking this is going to generate a lot of work for us. But that's something that's a sort of incentive we can do is, hey, if you sign away your rights to short-term this house and do long-term rental only, and you put that covenant on the property, we will give you a tax abatement over a certain amount of time. That's a complicated, controversial method. So.
And I think also, trying to encourage people to even think about sharing their home, or if they have a studio apartment, doing something that's affordable for some of the, hospitality workers or people who want to live there. Again, it's a choice. That's something that's very important to me to try to help resolve those types of challenges. I've formerly worked with United Way in Savannah. I understand we used to have a program called 211 for people who needed help with basic services. and they would, it was very confidential. The only information that was required from the United Way was a zip code. So I used to, and have recently asked them to pull the zip code of ours, 313, whatever it is, 31318, and just say, okay, can you tell me how many people are calling the United Way to get just basic services, help with paying rent, help with paying utilities? Because as Alan said earlier, there is a perception that Tybee is wealthy, and obviously there are people who are fortunate to live there and have wealth or have saved well or whatever, make good investments. But it's amazing how many people in that 31328 zip code are Tybee Island who need those services. So we are, affordable housing is an issue. Sometimes basic needs is an issue. And to me, all of that is part of environmental ethics. How can we, keep our community safe? How can we have a quality of life that will want people to stay there? So it all is interchanged, and I'm just really glad to have the opportunity to answer that particular question about affordable housing, because it is a challenge and it's important.
Thank you. And I think we could probably talk about these issues all night, and I know the conversation will definitely continue with UGA and our partnership with you all. And I want to thank you all for sharing these challenges and your solutions that have worked and your insights about what might work in the future. And also thank you for your ongoing partnership with UGA, of course, and your leadership really, both on Tybee and along the entire coast. So thank you very much. Thank you all.